Your soulmate is about to reveal they're married. But there's an even bigger secret. Watch now to discover the truth. My beloved child. Your soulmate is about to tell you something they have been terrified to say out loud. They are married. But before your heart decides what that means, there is something else you need to know, because the marriage itself is not the biggest secret. Not even close. For days, they have rehearsed this confession in their mind, imagining your reaction, wondering whether you will walk away before they can explain the part that changes everything. They know how painful those words could sound. They know you may immediately ask, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And that question is exactly what has been keeping them awake. But something happened recently that made silence impossible. A conversation took place behind closed doors, and during that conversation, your name was mentioned. The moment it was, your soulmate realized the truth they had been protecting could no longer stay hidden. Don't skip, because what they are preparing to reveal next explains why they kept their marriage hidden, and why someone else desperately hoped you would never learn the full story. There is one detail your soulmate has been afraid you might misunderstand. This marriage is not the beautiful, settled relationship people around them believe it to be. From the outside, everything may appear ordinary. Two people. A commitment. A life that supposedly has its direction already chosen. But behind that appearance is a completely different reality. Your soulmate has been carrying an emotional distance they could no longer pretend wasn't there, and recently, the person they married noticed it too. Then came the question that changed the atmosphere instantly: is there someone else in your heart? Your soulmate tried to avoid answering. Not because they didn't know the truth, but because they knew exactly whose name was sitting behind their silence. Yours. And when they finally admitted that their feelings had never disappeared, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Instead of anger being the biggest reaction, the other person revealed that they already knew something about you. Something your soulmate had never told them. That revelation left your soulmate speechless. How could this person know about you? Who had spoken to them? And more importantly, how long had they known? Your soulmate began asking questions, and the answers exposed something far deeper than a hidden marriage. Apparently, long before this confession was planned, someone close to the situation had been quietly influencing what your soulmate believed about you. Certain words you supposedly said were repeated incorrectly. Certain choices you supposedly made were described without the full context. Slowly, your soulmate began to realize that some of the distance between you may have been built on information that was never completely true. That is why they are preparing to tell you everything now. Yes, they must confess the marriage. Yes, they must explain why they remained silent. But something huge is waiting for you, because tucked inside this confession is one final secret, one involving a decision made before the marriage ever happened. And when your soulmate discovered who was behind that decision, they immediately knew you deserved to hear the name from them personally. The name your soulmate discovered was not the name of a stranger. It belonged to someone they had trusted during one of the most confusing periods of their life. Someone who knew exactly how deeply they cared about you. That person had watched your soulmate struggle with uncertainty, and instead of helping them find clarity, they quietly fed the fear already growing inside them. They suggested you had moved on. They implied you would eventually choose someone else. And whenever your soulmate considered reaching out to you, another carefully placed doubt appeared. But now there was evidence that those doubts had not happened naturally. Your soulmate found an old conversation that contradicted what they had been told, and suddenly one frightening question became impossible to ignore. Had their marriage been influenced by a lie from the very beginning? What happened next made the situation even more complicated. Your soulmate confronted the person who had given them that information, expecting a denial. Instead, there was hesitation. A long silence. Then came an admission your soulmate never expected. They had intentionally discouraged any possibility of reconciliation with you. Why? Because they believed the marriage your soulmate eventually entered was the safer choice. It looked more acceptable, more predictable, less emotionally complicated. But your soulmate immediately understood what had been taken from them, the opportunity to make that decision with the complete truth. And there was another disturbing detail. The person admitted they had known your soulmate still had feelings for you before the wedding. They simply believed those feelings would disappear afterward. They didn't. If anything, forcing them underground made them stronger. That is why this confession is no longer simply about saying, "I'm married." Your soulmate knows they must tell you what happened before that marriage, what they believed about you, and why they disappeared when part of them desperately wanted to turn around. But stay till the end, because they have not yet revealed the detail that frightened them most. While searching through those old conversations, your soulmate discovered something with a date attached to it. The date was only days before the marriage. And what they found proved that someone had received a message connected to you, a message your soulmate was never allowed to see. They stared at it for a long time, realizing one simple piece of information might have changed every decision that followed. Now they are trying to recover the complete message. And when they finally learn what it said, they may discover that the biggest secret was never why they married someone else, it was why your words were deliberately kept from them. That missing message has finally come back into your soulmate's hands, and the first few lines made them stop breathing for a moment. It wasn't angry. It wasn't a goodbye. And it certainly wasn't proof that you had forgotten them. The message carried something completely different, a sincere attempt to clear up the misunderstanding between you before everything became permanent. Your soulmate read it once, then again, searching for the rejection they had been told was there. It didn't exist. Instead, they found words suggesting there had still been something worth saving. Suddenly, memories they had tried to bury came rushing back. The unanswered questions. The strange timing. The way someone always seemed to have an explanation for your silence. Now your soulmate understands that your silence may never have been silence at all. But the message contained one sentence that disturbed them more than everything else. You had apparently asked for one honest conversation before they made any irreversible decision. Just one conversation. Your soulmate never knew. While they were being told you had accepted the distance between you, you had actually been trying to reach them. That realization brought a painful question: what would have happened if they had seen those words before the wedding? They cannot rewrite what happened, and they know being married creates real responsibilities that cannot simply be ignored. Yet they also know hiding this truth from you would continue the same pattern that created this situation. So they have made a decision. They are going to tell you about the marriage themselves, without excuses, and then show you the message they were never given. But there is still one piece they cannot explain. Because underneath the recovered message was evidence of another conversation, one that happened immediately after your words were intercepted. Two people discussed what should be done with it, and one of them wrote something your soulmate cannot forget: "Don't let them speak before the ceremony." That sentence changed everything. This was no longer someone casually offering bad advice. Someone had actively wanted to prevent the two of you from having that final conversation. Your soulmate started looking deeper, comparing dates and old conversations, and then noticed something even stranger. One of the people involved had a personal reason for wanting the marriage to happen exactly as planned. Don't skip, because your soulmate is getting dangerously close to understanding that motive. And when they discovered what this person stood to gain from keeping you apart, the secret surrounding the marriage became far bigger than either of you imagined. The motive was finally beginning to show itself, and it had almost nothing to do with love. The person who helped keep your message hidden had been deeply invested in making sure the marriage happened. Your soulmate discovered old conversations about family expectations, financial arrangements, and promises that depended on the wedding moving forward. Suddenly, the pressure they remembered from that time looked completely different. They had believed people were simply encouraging them to make a stable choice. Now they could see that at least one person had something personal to lose if they changed their mind. And that realization hurt more than your soulmate expected. Someone they trusted had watched them struggle, knew they still cared about you, and still decided that protecting an arrangement mattered more than letting them hear the truth. But one question remained: did the person your soulmate married know any of this before the ceremony? Your soulmate finally asked that question directly. The response wasn't immediate. There was a silence so uncomfortable that your soulmate already sensed another truth was coming. Then their spouse admitted something surprising. Before the wedding, they had been told there was someone from your soulmate's past who might try to interfere. They were never given the complete story. They were simply warned that if a message arrived from you, it would only create confusion and should be ignored. Your soulmate felt their stomach drop. This meant the effort to keep you apart had reached further than they realized. Yet their spouse revealed something else. Something that changed the emotional weight of the entire confession. They said they had always suspected your soulmate's heart was somewhere else, because on the night before the wedding, your soulmate had quietly said your name while believing nobody could hear. And that is the part your soulmate never expected anyone to remember. They had spent so long convincing themselves that marrying someone else meant they had permanently chosen a different future. But now they were being confronted with evidence that even at the final moment, you were still present in their heart. Still, they know feelings alone cannot erase commitments or undo consequences. That is why they are preparing to approach you carefully, with truth rather than promises. They want you to know what happened without asking you to carry the burden of fixing it. But before they can reach you, there is one final discovery they need to understand. Hidden among those old conversations is the identity of the person who originally started the false story about you, and when your soulmate saw where that first message came from, they recognized the connection immediately. It leads directly to someone who knew both of you far better than either of you ever suspected. The connection led back to someone who had quietly stood between both of you for much longer than your soulmate realized. This person knew when you were trying to reach out. They knew when your soulmate was vulnerable enough to believe the worst. And somehow, they always appeared at exactly the right moment with another explanation for why the two of you should remain apart. Your soulmate began rereading old conversations with fresh eyes, and a pattern emerged. Whenever your name came up, this person redirected the conversation toward the marriage. Whenever your soulmate questioned whether they were making a mistake, they were reminded that you supposedly wanted nothing more to do with them. But now those claims were falling apart. The timestamps didn't match. The stories changed. And one message revealed something chillingly simple. This person had been receiving information from both sides while allowing neither of you to know what the other was actually saying. Then your soulmate found the reason. It wasn't because this person secretly wanted them romantically. The truth was more complicated. They believed your relationship would pull your soulmate away from the future their family had already planned. The marriage represented stability, approval, and promises that had been discussed long before your soulmate understood how serious those expectations were. You represented uncertainty, but also something genuine that could make your soulmate question everything. So this person decided they knew what was best. They filtered conversations. They softened some truths and exaggerated others. They never physically forced your soulmate to marry, but they shaped the information surrounding the decision until one path looked closed and the other looked inevitable. And now your soulmate is asking themselves the hardest question yet: if they had known what you were really trying to say, would they ever have walked toward that ceremony? But there is something your soulmate still cannot ignore. While examining the original messages, they noticed one conversation that took place after the wedding, not before it. Someone asked whether you had discovered the truth about the marriage yet. The reply was only 5 words: no. Keep it that way. Your soulmate stared at that sentence because it proved the secrecy had continued deliberately even after the ceremony. That was the moment they stopped searching merely for explanations and decided you deserved the complete truth, regardless of how uncomfortable it might become. They are preparing to reveal the marriage themselves. No more distorted messages. No more people speaking between you. But don't skip what comes next, because your soulmate has just uncovered one final attachment connected to that conversation. And inside it is something written about you after the wedding that they were never supposed to find. What your soulmate found inside that final attachment changed the direction of everything. It contained a private note written after the wedding, explaining why the truth about the marriage needed to remain hidden from you. But the reason wasn't what your soulmate expected. The person behind the interference wasn't afraid you would cause trouble. They were afraid you and your soulmate would finally speak directly and compare what each of you had been told. One sentence stood out: if they talk without us involved, they'll discover everything. Your soulmate read those words again and again. Suddenly, the secrecy after the marriage made sense. Someone wasn't merely protecting the marriage. They were protecting the false story that had helped create it. And now your soulmate knew there was still more buried beneath that story. They kept searching and discovered records showing that attempts had been made to reach them after the wedding. One of those attempts was connected directly to you. That discovery hit hard because your soulmate had believed you knew they were married and had simply chosen to disappear. But the dates told another story. On the exact day your message was intercepted, your soulmate had almost contacted you too. They remembered holding their phone, staring at your name, wondering whether they should finally ask what had really happened between you. Before they could, someone close to them insisted that contacting you would only reopen a door you had already closed. Now your soulmate understands the timing was not accidental. Someone knew you had reached out, and deliberately stopped your soulmate from answering. But the most unsettling discovery came moments later. Your soulmate noticed that one of your old messages had actually reached an account they personally used. It had been opened, then removed before they ever saw it. That narrowed everything down to only a few people who could have had access during the days surrounding the wedding. Your soulmate began comparing devices, dates, and conversations until one person suddenly stood apart from everyone else. This person had been present the night before the ceremony. They had known your soulmate was still thinking about you. And according to one newly recovered message, they had made a private promise to someone else that night, a promise involving you. Don't skip what comes next, because your soulmate is about to discover exactly what that promise was, and why revealing their marriage to you could expose a secret someone has been protecting ever since. The promise made the night before the wedding was finally uncovered, and your soulmate could barely believe what they were reading. Someone close to them had agreed to make sure there would be no direct contact between the two of you until the ceremony was over. But there was a condition attached. If your soulmate ever discovered that you had tried to reach them, the person responsible was supposed to claim it had been a misunderstanding. That explained the missing messages, the perfectly timed interruptions, and the repeated insistence that you had already moved on. Yet one detail made your soulmate's heart race. The agreement mentioned a conversation with you that supposedly happened shortly before the wedding, a conversation your soulmate had never heard about. Who spoke to you, and what exactly did they tell you? Your soulmate searched deeper until they found fragments of that conversation. Someone had apparently approached you with information designed to make you believe your soulmate had willingly chosen the marriage and wanted absolutely no further contact. At almost the same time, your soulmate was being told that you had accepted everything and wanted to be left alone. Two different stories. Two people being pushed toward the same silence. Your soulmate finally understood how carefully the distance had been maintained. But instead of blaming everyone else, they felt something heavier, responsibility. They know they still made the final decision to marry. They know manipulation does not erase that choice. That is why their confession to you cannot be an excuse. They want to tell you, "I'm married, and I should have told you sooner." Then they want to explain the truth you were both denied. But before they could prepare that confession, another message surfaced, one sent by the person your soulmate married. It was written only days after the ceremony and addressed to someone involved in keeping you apart. The first line sounded uncertain, almost uncomfortable. Then came a question that changed everything. Are you sure they never saw the message? Your soulmate froze. Until that moment, they believed their spouse had known very little about what happened before the wedding. Now there was evidence suggesting they knew at least one message had been hidden. Stay till the end, because your soulmate is about to confront them with those exact words. And depending on the answer, the bigger secret may no longer be simply that your soulmate is married, it may be that someone inside that marriage has known the truth about you from the very beginning. The confrontation happened sooner than anyone expected. Your soulmate placed the recovered message in front of their spouse and asked one simple question, what did you know? At first, there was no answer. Then their spouse admitted they had known a message from you existed before the wedding, but they had never been shown what it actually said. Someone had told them the message would only confuse your soulmate and possibly stop the ceremony. Afraid of losing the future everyone had already prepared, they chose not to question it. That admission hurt, but your soulmate noticed something important. Their spouse wasn't defending what happened anymore. Instead, they quietly said, "There's something else I should have told you a long time ago." And suddenly, the hidden marriage was no longer the only confession waiting to be made. Their spouse revealed that shortly after the wedding, they had discovered your soulmate still kept something connected to you, a small reminder they had never been able to throw away. That was when the spouse realized the feelings had never truly disappeared. But instead of confronting your soulmate, they contacted the same person who had helped keep you apart and asked whether you might return. The answer was immediate: you would never come back because you had already chosen another path. Now everyone in the room understood that statement may have been another lie. Your soulmate felt the entire history shifting beneath them. How many decisions had been made based on information nobody bothered to verify? More importantly, why had the person controlling these messages been so determined to keep the marriage intact even after the wedding was already over? Then the spouse finally revealed the detail they had been hiding. The person who interfered had once admitted that if your soulmate discovered the complete truth about you, an old promise involving the family could collapse, and with it, an arrangement that had been kept secret for years. Your soulmate immediately asked what arrangement they meant, but their spouse only knew part of the story. There was apparently a document created before the wedding, and your soulmate's marriage was connected to it in a way they had never been told. Now the search has changed completely. Your soulmate is no longer asking only who hid your messages. They are asking why so many people needed this marriage to happen. And when they finally locate that document, one name written near the bottom could reveal the real reason you were pushed out of their life. The document was hidden among old family records, and the moment your soulmate saw the date, they knew this had started long before the wedding. It described an agreement between two families, an arrangement tied to property, financial obligations, and a promise that would become far easier to fulfill if the marriage went forward. But your soulmate had never been told their personal life was connected to any of it. They had believed the pressure to marry came from tradition and concern for their future. Now they could see another layer. Certain people had been protecting an agreement that benefited from their decision. And near the bottom of the document was the name they had feared seeing, the same person who first claimed you had moved on. Suddenly, every hidden message and every carefully planted doubt had a possible motive. But there was another signature on the page, and this one changed the situation completely. It belonged to someone your soulmate never suspected, someone who had repeatedly acted as though they knew nothing about the interference. When confronted, this person didn't deny signing the document. Instead, they insisted the arrangement was supposed to protect the family from an old financial problem, not control your soulmate's heart. Your soulmate asked the obvious question, then why was information about the person I loved kept from me? Silence followed. Finally came an answer. They were afraid that if your soulmate spoke to you before the ceremony, the wedding would be cancelled, the agreement would collapse, and several people would face consequences they had spent years trying to avoid. Your soulmate realized their emotions had been treated like a risk that needed to be managed. That discovery made one decision unavoidable. Your soulmate cannot keep allowing other people to decide what you deserve to know. They are preparing to reveal the marriage to you themselves, even though they are terrified that hearing those words may make you walk away before the explanation begins. But something else happened while they were examining the document. Folded behind the final page was a handwritten statement that was never included in the official agreement. It mentioned you directly. Not vaguely. Not as someone from the past. Your name was written there beside a warning dated before the wedding. Your soulmate read the sentence twice, then immediately asked who had written it. Nobody answered. Don't skip, because that handwritten warning suggests someone knew about your connection far earlier than anyone admitted, and what they feared about you may finally explain why keeping you apart became so important. The handwriting was finally recognized, and your soulmate felt a chill when they learned who it belonged to. It came from an older family member who had always appeared neutral. Someone who never openly pressured the marriage and rarely mentioned you at all. Yet the warning beside your name said something remarkably specific: if you and your soulmate spoke privately before the wedding, the arrangement may not survive. Your soulmate immediately demanded an explanation. Why would a family agreement depend on keeping two people from having one honest conversation? The older relative resisted at first, then admitted that certain people already knew your soulmate had serious doubts about getting married. They also knew those doubts became stronger whenever your name surfaced. You weren't considered dangerous. You were considered the one person capable of making your soulmate stop and question whether the life being chosen for them was truly what they wanted. That answer exposed the emotional truth beneath everything else. The people involved had convinced themselves they were protecting stability. They feared financial consequences, family conflict, and promises falling apart. So instead of trusting your soulmate with the complete truth, they controlled what information reached them. Your messages became inconvenient. Your presence became a threat to their plan. And eventually, silence between you became useful. Your soulmate listened in disbelief as the older relative admitted that nobody expected the deception to continue for so long. They assumed the marriage would happen, feelings would settle, and you would become a distant memory. But that never happened. Your soulmate still thought about you. Their spouse noticed. And now every hidden detail was returning at once. Still, there was one question nobody had answered: who originally told the family that you were trying to stop the marriage? Because that claim had apparently started everything. Your soulmate searched through the oldest records and finally located the message where the accusation first appeared. But when they opened it, they discovered something nobody expected. The words attributed to you were not actually written by you. Pieces from separate conversations had been placed together, creating the impression that you intended to interfere with the wedding. Your soulmate stared at the screen, realizing the entire chain of decisions may have begun with a manufactured version of your words. Now they are closer than ever to telling you they're married, and revealing everything behind it. But first, they need to know who created that false message. And one tiny detail inside the file has just pointed them toward a person who has remained almost completely invisible throughout this entire story. The tiny detail was hidden in the file information. A name attached to the original copy before the message had been passed through the family. Your soulmate recognized it immediately, but not for the reason anyone expected. This person had never openly argued against you. In fact, they had occasionally defended you, which made them seem like the last person capable of creating something designed to keep you apart. Your soulmate contacted them privately and asked one direct question: "Did you put those words together?" There was a long pause before the answer came. Yes. But then came an explanation that opened an entirely new mystery. They claimed they had not invented the idea themselves. Someone had given them fragments of your conversations and instructed them to create a summary that would make the family understand why the wedding needed to happen quickly. Your soulmate demanded to know who gave that instruction. At first, the person refused, saying the truth would create damage that could never be reversed. But your soulmate was finished accepting silence as protection. Finally, a name was revealed, and suddenly the entire chain connected. It was someone directly involved in the old family arrangement, someone who stood to lose far more than approval or reputation if the marriage were cancelled. They had known your soulmate was uncertain. They had known you were still trying to communicate. And instead of allowing the truth to reach either of you, they turned incomplete conversations into evidence that you were supposedly trying to interfere. Your soulmate felt anger, but beneath it was something heavier: grief for a decision made without all the facts. Still, they knew one thing clearly. Whatever happened next, they could no longer hide behind what other people had done. So your soulmate began preparing the confession they had feared from the beginning. They gathered the original messages, the altered version, the family agreement, and the records showing your attempts to reach them. They intend to tell you they are married before showing you anything else, because they refuse to manipulate your reaction with excuses. But just as they were ready to contact you, the person behind the false message sent one final warning: before you tell them, ask why their name was already in the agreement. Your soulmate froze. They opened the document again and looked closer at the handwritten section. Your name had not been added near the wedding date. It appeared on an earlier page created long before anyone claimed you were interfering. And now your soulmate is facing the biggest question yet: why were people discussing you before the plan to keep you away supposedly even began? That earlier page forced your soulmate to question everything they thought they had uncovered. Your name appeared beside a short note dated months before the wedding pressure became intense, proving the family had been aware of your importance much earlier than anyone admitted. But the note did not describe you as a problem. It described you as a possibility, someone your soulmate might choose if they were ever allowed to make the decision without outside pressure. That distinction mattered. It meant the people behind the arrangement had not reacted suddenly because they believed you were interfering. They had anticipated your influence from the beginning. And when your soulmate asked how your name entered a private family document so early, one relative finally admitted there had been a meeting about you long before the wedding plans became public. Your soulmate demanded to know what happened in that meeting. The answer came slowly. Several people had discussed whether the existing family arrangement could survive if your soulmate chose you instead. Some believed the agreement should be abandoned and your soulmate should be free to decide. Others argued too much had already been promised. But then someone brought information about you into the room, details supposedly proving that you would never build a future with your soulmate. Nobody checked whether those claims were accurate. They simply became the justification everyone needed. Your soulmate realized the deception had started before the intercepted messages, before the altered conversations, even before the rushed ceremony. Someone had been shaping the family's perception of you for months. But why? What could possibly make one person work that hard to remove you from a decision that should have belonged to your soulmate? Then came the detail that made the room go completely quiet. During that old meeting, someone had apparently presented a sealed letter and claimed it came from a person close to you. The letter contained information about your intentions, and it became one of the strongest reasons the family believed your soulmate should stop waiting for you. Your soulmate had never seen this letter. Neither had their spouse. Now they insisted on finding it, and after searching through the same records, the envelope finally appeared. The seal had already been broken years ago, but the pages were still inside. Your soulmate reached for them, expecting another distorted version of your words. Instead, the first sentence revealed that the writer had personally spoken with you. And when your soulmate saw the signature at the bottom, they realized the person who wrote that letter was someone you may have trusted too. The signature belonged to someone who had once positioned themselves as a quiet bridge between you and your soulmate. That was what made the letter so difficult to understand. This person had known your feelings were complicated, knew you wanted clarity, and apparently knew you had never given the cold rejection described to the family. Yet the letter claimed you had accepted that there was no future between you. Your soulmate compared those statements with your recovered messages and immediately saw contradictions. Dates overlapped. Details were missing. One conversation had been described completely differently from what the surviving messages showed. Then your soulmate noticed a sentence near the end. The writer recommended that the family move quickly before uncertainty returns. Suddenly, the rushed wedding timeline no longer looked accidental. Someone had been creating urgency long before your soulmate understood why. Your soulmate confronted the writer, expecting another carefully prepared explanation. Instead, the person sounded exhausted. They admitted the letter had been written under pressure after they were told the family faced serious consequences if the marriage arrangement collapsed. They convinced themselves they were preventing a larger crisis. But then your soulmate asked the question that mattered most. Did you actually speak to them? The answer was yes, but not about abandoning your soulmate. According to the writer, you had expressed uncertainty because you were receiving conflicting information too. You wanted to understand what your soulmate truly wanted before making any promise. Those words were transformed into something entirely different. Your uncertainty became rejection. Your request for clarity became distance. And your soulmate's hesitation was treated as proof that the marriage should move forward. Two people asking for truth had been made to believe the other had already chosen silence. But the writer had kept one thing hidden from everyone, a second page that was never included with the letter. They said they could not bring themselves to destroy it because it contained the part of your conversation that contradicted everything the family wanted to believe. Your soulmate asked where it was. After another painful silence, the writer revealed that the page had been stored separately for years. When your soulmate finally received a copy, they saw a sentence attributed directly to you, a sentence saying that if your soulmate truly wanted another life, you would respect it, but if they were being pushed into a decision, you wanted them to know they still had a choice. Your soulmate stared at those words, shaken. Yet beneath them was a handwritten response from someone else. They must never see this. And your soulmate recognized the handwriting immediately. The handwriting belonged to the same older family member who had written the warning beside your name, but this time your soulmate refused to accept another partial explanation. They placed the second page on the table and asked why those words had been hidden. The older relative looked at the sentence you had spoken years ago and finally admitted what nobody had been willing to say clearly. They knew that if your soulmate learned you were still leaving the choice in their hands, the wedding might never happen. Your soulmate had been questioning everything at that time. One honest message from you could have given them the courage to stop, ask questions, and demand time. So the page disappeared. The family arrangement continued. And your soulmate walked toward a marriage believing the person they truly cared about had already released them. But then your soulmate asked something even harder: why did everyone keep hiding the truth after I was already married? The older relative's answer exposed the fear that had controlled everything afterward. Once the ceremony happened, admitting the deception would mean admitting that your soulmate had entered the marriage without knowing crucial information. Nobody wanted to face that. So every new attempt from you had to be explained away. Every question from your soulmate had to be redirected. And every sign that their feelings remained unresolved became something the family hoped would eventually disappear. But it never did. Your soulmate's spouse had sensed it. The people around them had sensed it. And now the person who helped hide the truth was finally admitting that the silence continued not to protect your soulmate, but to protect everyone else from the consequences of what they had done. That confession should have answered the biggest question, but instead it opened one more door. Before leaving, the older relative handed your soulmate a small envelope that had never been included with the other records. They said, if you're really going to tell them you're married, then they deserve this too. Inside was not another family agreement or altered message. It was something your soulmate themselves had written before the wedding. A letter they barely remembered creating during one terrified, sleepless night. They had apparently asked someone to deliver it to you if the ceremony went forward. It never reached you. Your soulmate unfolded the page and recognized every word as their own. But near the bottom was a sentence they had completely forgotten writing, a confession about why they were going through with the marriage despite still thinking about you. And that sentence may finally reveal the secret your soulmate has been most afraid to admit. The forgotten sentence was painfully simple: I'm going through with this because I believe you've already chosen to let me go. Your soulmate stared at their own handwriting, realizing the marriage had not begun because their feelings for you disappeared. It began because they genuinely believed yours had. Everything they had uncovered. The intercepted messages, the altered conversations, the missing second page, had helped create that belief. But the letter revealed something even more personal. Your soulmate had written that if they ever discovered they had misunderstood you, they would owe you the truth no matter how much time had passed. Now that promise was sitting in their hands. And for the first time, telling you about the marriage no longer felt like something they could postpone. They read further and found another confession they barely remembered making. Before the wedding, your soulmate had considered stopping the ceremony and contacting